from just what goes on. And, you're I'm on a Zoom and that, you don't want to get that. But they're doing well, and I am back from going down and getting everything done regarding my mom that went to be with the Lord about a couple months ago now, something like that, and God helped me get everything done. And because I'm an only, which means I got just my job. So went and did it, and hallelujah. She's not, the last couple weeks were rough, but no worries now, right? Thank you, Lord. I was wondering, since we have guests that were here tonight, and I always wonder this. I'm always thinking about this. I'm like, how are we in the minds of those that are new, or the minds of those that are visiting, in the minds of those that don't know what we are or what we do, and I don't even know that I know what we are or what we do. I don't know if there's labels. I think what happens is we get all these boxes and we get all these labels, and we gotta have a name, and it's gotta be this or that, and I'm like, why? Why? Well, it makes it easier to communicate. Yeah, but all of these words that we use have all this baggage that goes along with it, right? And I know that those of you that have been around a little while, you know about that. And I know that one of the reasons that you guys are here is you want to get rid of the baggage. And we're doing our best to be able to do that. So you'll notice that sometimes we use the word Jesus, and sometimes we use the name that is the real name, which is Yeshua, right? Because we like going back and looking at the languages and the original languages. And I imagine when Art, and I can't believe you're even here tonight, because you guys were, but we're glad that you are. And I'm not going to be loud tonight, because never mind. If I were Art in about 5 minutes, I would be going, praying. But anyway. All right, let's get on with it then. Here are, what's up? What does that mean? Hold on?
Sounds like a song.
Hold on. I'll let you know where we're going to be tonight. All right, we're going to be in Jerusalem, as we're in Matthew, and we are now at the moment where Jesus and his followers, and he has a lot of them now. Okay, he's not only got the 12, they have made their way from Galilee all the way up, and this is like what is known in Christianity as the triumphal entry. Okay, and this is where we are in. Got any idea why that wouldn't be working? Can you advance to the next one? Oh, there we go. Now we got it. All right, this is where we are, and there are things that we never learned about this. Okay, we learned that on that day when Jesus entered into Jerusalem, that there were, and we have in our mind this picture of there being throngs of people, and like everybody in Jerusalem went out with their branches and waved them, and out of that we get the idea in Christianity of what? Palm Sunday. We're not going to go there. Okay? And the reason we're not going to go there is we're going to read what's in the Bible about what happened on that day. And what you need to realize is that not everybody in Jerusalem was waving branches. Okay? Those that gathered with him originally in Galilee and followed him. And as he went, the crowd grew and grew and grew. And as they began to enter in, it was that crowd that began to wave the branches. And then they got into Jerusalem and something else went on. Okay, this is the way it reads in the complete Jewish Bible. As they were approaching Jerusalem, they came to, what is that word? Beit Haggai, on the Mount of Olives. Okay, we're going to go slow. Because what happens normally is we read over this and it's just like zippity-doo-dah. We think we know everything that's in there and we miss little details that are amazing. All right. Now, this is a map of the area, and they would have been making their way around the Mount of Olives, which is right there. That's the English word for the Hebrew Beit Haggai. Notice how near this is to Jerusalem. Okay? And in their minds, in that day, it was Jerusalem. It was like a suburb of the main area. All right? Think of Eagle River. Bless Eagle River, right? And Eagle River in Anchorage. You know, when I moved up years ago, I didn't know that Eagle River was Anchorage. Now, is there anybody here from Eagle River? Please don't take that the wrong way. I know that there's a lot of you guys that want out. And right now, I don't blame you for wanting out the way things have been. But this is the way it was. So he wasn't all the way in the, like, the gates of Jerusalem, but almost, all right? And it was right on the Mount of Olives, which is really neat. Now, something else really neat is the name Beit Haggai means house of figs. Okay? That is going to have meaning later. Not later tonight, but later down the road as we read a little bit more about what's going on in Matthew. Now, something else that we need to realize is that these were the Moedim. The Moedim we learned about last week were the holidays, if you will, that were in the Bible, in Leviticus, that all of the Jews, they practiced and they kept them every year, right when it was supposed to be. And we already know from last week, why was Yeshua going up to Jerusalem? Because it was a holiday. What was it? Passover and unleavened bread and first fruits. So all of those were getting ready to happen. Now, here's something else. On those days in Deuteronomy, it was that all of the men were required, the women were allowed. All right, it wasn't only a men's gathering. The women were allowed to go up from wherever they were in Israel, in Judea, in the land of Judea or Galilee or wherever, to go up to Jerusalem. How many times a year? 3. All right? That means that the number of people that were in Jerusalem grew ginormously. Okay, maybe as much as 10-fold more. Okay, that's a lot. Can you imagine that in Anchorage? Can you imagine how many do we have now? 280,000 or something like that? Can you imagine having over 1 million here? Because we're going to have the something Iditarod, or I don't know. All right? That's what it was like in Jerusalem. Okay, now, notice, next, Yeshua, he gets two of his disciples, and he gives them these instructions. Go into the village ahead of you, and you immediately will immediately find a donkey tethered there with its colt. Untie them and bring them to me, and if anyone asks you anything about it, tell him the Lord needs them, and then he will let them go at once. I always thought, what would it be like to be the guy that owned the donkey and its baby, and to have suddenly somebody runs up and they're like, hey, we need these. He'd be like, why? Okay, and what is the answer? The Lord needs them. Now, it's amazing to me that this is the Lord, because nobody who's Jewish really would know what those words mean. So, in other words, there was either an arrangement that had already been made, or God just spoke to the guy that owned the donkey, all right? But whatever it was, they get this, and they have a donkey and the baby, which is either a foal or, I think there's another word, a colt, all right? But whatever it is, how many animals is that? You guys are math geniuses. How many animals is that? 2. You might wonder why, when you read about this in Mark, there's only 1. This is one of those areas where people make all these arguments against the Bible, and the Bible's not true because there's one of these discrepancies, because in Matthew there's 2 animals and in Mark there's only 1. Why? It has everything to do with the audience of those writings. Okay? Matthew was written to who? Jews. That's right. Okay? That means that he is going to have more than Mark does of Bible verses that are out of the Tanakh and the Torah, which is exactly what you read about. Okay? Now, Mark's gospel, on the other hand, is written with a slant in the direction of who? The non-Jews. Okay? You only have 2 options in that day. You're either Jewish or you're a Gentile. Okay? That's the ones that Mark was writing to. And what that means is they didn't know, and in Mark's opinion, they didn't even need to know why there needed to be 2 animals. And there is a reason why. We're going to look at that in a minute. Okay, now, Matthew, when he's writing, he does what Mark does not do, which is he gives a prophecy that was written in the Tanakh about this very event. Okay? He says, this happened in order to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. Stop right there. Does anybody know the name of that prophet? What? Zechariah. Okay? And these are the words that Matthew writes, all right, reminding them of Zechariah. Say to the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, riding humbly on a donkey and on a colt, the offspring of a beast of burden. In other words, 2 animals are written about. Now, remember, in the whenever they were quoting a verse out of the Old Testament, out of the Tanakh, whenever they were doing that, they would give a little verse, but it was in order to draw their minds into the whole context of the writing. Okay? How many of you knew that? All right, we're going to go over that. I'll give you one example. When Yeshua is on the cross, he utters these words. Okay? Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Remember that? Anybody know what those words mean? My God, why have you forsaken me? And I always looked at that and I was like, wait a minute, because this is the baggage. Here's the theology that I learned. That when Jesus was on the cross, his Father left and deserted him there. Why? Because he was going to die for the world. And I always used to think, why would God do that? And then you're given the answer. God cannot what? Look on sin. Baloney. Then he would never be looking at any of us, would he? Right? Think about what happened in the garden. In the garden, was God like, whoop, Adam, you blew it now, I'm not looking at you? No. In the garden, God, Yehovah, was like, Adam, where are you, buddy? Actually, it was probably more like, Adam, where are you? But whatever. You get the idea. The idea is that when you have these boxes, these theologies, and they bother you, ask. Okay? And it won't be like when you ask, you know I'm not going to go, no, you're not allowed to believe that. Not at all. Okay? But some of the things that we learned, we need to rewire them. Because what happens is we get a different idea about who God is than who he really is. Right? Okay. So what was Yeshua doing when he uttered those words, my God, why have you forsaken me? Read Psalm 22, which begins with the words, my God, why have you... Oh, because in that day, they didn't have numbers. He wouldn't have looked and said, guys, I want you to go back and read Psalm 22. Not at all. Okay? He uttered those words, and everybody that was there that knew the Tanakh, the Old Testament, that knew David's words went, oh my goodness, he's quoting Psalm 22. And you go back and you read it, and it's all about the victorious thing that was happening when he died. Okay? It ends in victory over the enemies. It's really amazing. Okay? That's what I mean. So that's exactly what Matthew is doing by drawing everybody's attention to Zechariah. So that means we need to read a little bit more about what's in Zechariah. Okay? Now, this is in Zechariah, where the quote is, all right? And it's a little bit different, isn't it? All right? How does that read? Rejoice with all your hearts, daughter of Zion. Now, in a minute, we're going to learn who the daughter of Zion is, because you think that you know and you might not. All right? Shout out loud, daughter of Yerushalayim. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous. And he is victorious, yet he is humble. He's riding on a donkey. Yes, on a lowly donkey's colt. Did you notice what's not in Matthew's version of it? That he is victorious and that we are to rejoice. Okay? Now, in that day, and even now, Hebrew rabbis, they saw these words in Zechariah as talking about a messianic figure. All right? Regarding there being two animals Get this. This is out of the Mishnah. Mishnah is written down oral tradition. Okay? So you know how we've learned that in the day of Jesus, in the day of Yeshua, who was Jewish, that Jews had another law. They didn't only have God's law written down, Torah. They had other laws that had been developed over the years, and they had thousands of them, all right? Later, they wrote those all down. That's known as Mishnah, okay? And in the Mishnah, what we learn is that a mother donkey could only be sold or used for work along with its baby. So now you know why. That there were two. Mark, writing only to the non-Jews, he would have been like, they don't know that. Okay, they don't need all that information. In other words, all right? Are you with me? Now, here it is again. All right, oops. There it is again. And notice we read these words, say to the daughter of Zion. The daughter of Zion is very specific. It means Jerusalem. It doesn't mean Israel. It doesn't mean Judea. It doesn't mean Galilee. It means Jerusalem. That's interesting, because what's going on is Yeshua is entering in to Jerusalem. This is going to be like an announcement that's made to all the residents of Jerusalem. All right? In Matthew, up till now, Yeshua's work in Jerusalem has been rather limited. And remember that he didn't want anybody to know yet who he was. Well, not anybody. Peter knew, right? Because it was revealed to him on the mountain. But not everybody. Remember when somebody would be healed and they would be like, whoa, you must be. He'd be like, shh, calm down. Don't tell anybody. Remember? Okay? Not anymore. Okay? We're heading up. We're going into the gates, and there's not going to be any more hiding. Everything is going to be out in the open. Okay, now, I always thought the daughter of Zion meant just Jews, all right? It doesn't. It means Jerusalem. And think of it like this. Equating daughter of Zion with all of Israel is like equating all of the U.S. with what goes on in Washington. Would you like that? Maybe not, all right? Now, look, the words, look, your king is coming, all right? The idea and the word king and that very idea would have made the Romans and the Roman leaders, as well as the Jewish religious leaders, that would have made them a little edgy. Okay, with this idea that there was a king. But to Jews in general, king meant the one that they were waiting for. It wasn't Herod, although Herod was the legal king of the Jews, all right? It wasn't him. They were waiting for the offspring of David. Okay? By the way, very interesting that I learned and was reminded that there was another king that rode into Jerusalem, or at least a suburb of it, named Gihon, on a donkey. Does anybody know who it was? Shlomo rode in on his anointing, when he was going to be anointed. I think in most Bible translations, it has the word mule, all right? But in Hebrew, a mule and a female donkey are one word. So you have already in the Bible an example of an offspring of David riding in to Jerusalem humbly on a donkey. Now, all of us know that Shlomo didn't end up with the greatest, record, right? Okay? Began really well and was noted in Judaism, and to this day, he is considered one of the main and wisest Torah teachers, and he's a prophet. And in Jesus' day, in Yeshua's day, in their minds, Solomon was a miracle worker. There were all sorts of records of Solomon healing others. So he was considered a miracle worker and a healer and all of this. And now you have another guy, an offspring of David, riding in to Jerusalem to be anointed, if you will, as king of Israel, riding on a donkey. Pretty neat, huh? All right, now, this was nothing like what would happen if a Roman king were going to be anointed or announced. They would have had chariots and army and everything to do with power over others. That was Rome. Now, it's a little bit familiar, isn't it? With this idea of a government having power over others. That's what it was like to live in Israel in the day. Okay? And what we're going to learn as we move ahead, I'll give you a little taste that what happened when Yeshua died on a cross, or whatever word you want to use for what it was, the example of what was going to happen there was overcoming the power of Rome. Okay? That's a big deal. And we'll learn more about that as we move ahead. Okay, let's go on. All right, next there's the verse again. Next, the Talmudim, that's what? Disciples, all right, they went and did as Yeshua had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put their robes on them, and Yeshua sat on them. Crowds of people carpeted the road with their clothing, while others cut branches from trees and spread them in the road. This was not abnormal. Okay, when in Israel, when one's robes or clothes were laid down at the king's feet, it was a normal way that they gave honor and respect to whoever it was. And you notice the words, Yeshua sat on them. I believe that means the robes. I don't believe that means the donkeys. Why? Because I don't know how you do that. You could be on one, but both? I don't know how that would work. Anyway, now what happens next? Crowds ahead of him and behind him. So these are crowds that are surrounding him. These are not just people that were, sitting around in the mall in Jerusalem and heard a ruckus and went out and went, hallelujah. No, that's not what's going on at all. These are those that are already with Yeshua. They know who he is. Okay, they're following him and they're ready to help him announce. They are shouting, please deliver us. And to the Son of David, Matthew adds that. All right? Blessed is he who comes in the name of Adonai, you in the highest heaven, please deliver us. Okay? Now, what you might not realize is what's going on here with these words. These are not words that they made up. Okay? These are not words that just instantly they were all like, praise, please, deliver us. Not at all. These are words that are already written in the Tanakh, in the Psalms. And you realize that whenever they had these holidays, Okay? All of the Jewish followers of Yehovah, all of them would have these ceremonies that they would do. And one of them had to do with chanting the words of Psalms. And the one that they're chanting here, we're going to look at in a minute. It's amazing. Okay, what was going on? Now, the words, please deliver us, in Hebrew, is one word, Hoshiana. Okay? And in English, it's Hosanna. All right? Now, I love the words of, what's the guy's name that wrote the music that we do sometimes? I don't remember. Joshua Aaron. Yeah, he has an awesome version of Hoshiana. And we do it here sometimes, okay? Now, just in case you want to know, that's a combination word of Yasha, which means save or deliver, and Ana, which means please or we beg you. Okay? And what's amazing is that word Yasha is the root of the name Yeshua. That's why it works in Hebrew, but it doesn't work in English when you're reading Matthew and you go, his name will be Jesus, because he will save his people. And you're like, all right. But if you go, his name will be Yeshua, because he will Yeshua his people, you're like, oh, there's a little connection there. Now, as they're going in, they're chanting from the Hallels, and these are the words in English from a little bit of section of the Hallels. The very rock that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this. This has come from Adonai, and in our eyes it is amazing. This is the day Adonai has made, a day for us to rejoice and be glad. Please, Adonai, save us. Please, Adonai, rescue us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Adonai. We bless you from the house of Adonai. And you realize all those words would be Yehovah, but they were already using Adonai. Okay, just so you know. That's amazing, those words. Now, imagine now they're at the gate that goes in the wall to go into Jerusalem, which, by the way, most or many Bible scholars believe that that was a gate known as the Sheep Gate. And it was the gate on the way from Bethlehem, which means what in Hebrew? House of bread. That's where the lambs that were going to be used and slain on Passover, they were born and raised in the house of bread. And on this day, when Yeshua was entering into Jerusalem, it was the very day that they led the lambs in through the sheep gate in order to be inspected and then slaughtered for the sacrifice. So when he entered Jerusalem, we read next, the whole city was stirred. I like the way he translates that, because normally when you read that, you get the idea the whole city is like, yay, Jesus. That's not what that word means. That word, it means disturbed. They were annoyed. They were not liking it, whatever it was that was going on, and they asked, who is this? And the crowds, which crowds? The one that was with Yeshua, they answered. So you got to imagine this the way that it really was. You have a bunch of guys from Nazareth, okay, and Galilee, and they're entering into Jerusalem. Let me put it a different way. You have a bunch of good old boys from Alabama, and they're about to enter into New York. Yeah, okay, and as these good old boys enter into New York, all right, they have this guy that's with them, and they're making all this noise and ruckus, and the people of New York are like, guys, hold on, who is this? Well, this is Jesus from Birmingham. All right? That's a little bit about the way that it was back then, okay? Now, more and more are beginning to join the crowds. The whole city being stirred up is a Hebrew idiom that means it was troubled. All right? The Jerusalem Jews were not as sure of this guy as the Galilean Jews were. Okay? Why? Well, they were used to this going on. Now, when they answer, this is Yeshua, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee, that was referring back to the words of Moses. Do you remember what Moses wrote about Yeshua? Do you remember? This is what he wrote in Deuteronomy. Adonai will raise up for you, meaning Israel, a prophet like me from among yourselves, from your own kinsmen. You are to pay attention to him. The Galileans were saying, this is the guy. All right? And by the way, the word that we read there, pay attention to him. John, what word is that? Shema. Hear and obey. Hear and do. Hear and obey. So Moses is letting Israel know there's going to be a guy, and God is going to bring him to you, and he's going to be a prophet like me. That one is the one that you need to hear and obey. Shema. This is what Tom Bradford, an excellent Torah guy, wrote about all of this. He says, while for the proud Galileans, their very own prophet from Nazareth was a wonderful thing. The residents of Jerusalem had dealt too many times with would-be prophets coming to town during the festivals that did nothing but stir up trouble. Although these are all Hebrews, Galileans and Judeans are somewhat like oil and water. They don't mix very well. Does that give you a little bit more background of what was going on that day? Okay, so now we're going to move from the streets of Jerusalem. He and they have gone in the gate, and now they're going to move right into the temple. Okay? Yeshua entered the temple grounds and drove out those that were doing business there, both the merchants and their customers. He upset the desks of the money changers and knocked over the benches of those who were selling pigeons. Why would they be doing that? Why would they sell birds? Sacrifice for those that didn't have animals. Okay? And he said to them, it has been written. Well, wait a minute. Why would he do that if the law is thrown out? Just kidding. Okay, it has been written, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers. During the holy days, people coming up to Jerusalem from all over, most or many of them did not bring their own animals with them. It wasn't an easy journey without the animals, okay? And they didn't need to bring the animals. Why? Because there was a market. the religious leaders had developed a market in order that those that either A, didn't have the money for an animal, hence the birds, or they had the money but they didn't bring the animal with them, they were selling animals and changing over the money. And you know what? There was nothing wrong with that. What was wrong with it was they had made it into a business in order to make money. Now, there's nothing wrong with making money. This is not where you are going to apply that idea of making money. Okay? They were basically, those that were poor were getting more poor. All right, and it wasn't good. Now, something do I want to introduce this? Well, look, it's only 7:30, according to that clock. All right. There are writings, there are a lot of writings that were written by Jews and rabbis and things like that. Some of them are very ancient and they're not in our Bibles, okay? One of them is known, and it was used in Yeshua's day. One of them was known as the Psalms of Solomon. Did you know about that one? And there's already a connection there, writing in on the donkey. This is right out of the Psalms of Solomon, not in your Bibles. And it's about the Messiah. And he will purge Jerusalem and make it holy as it was even from the beginning. Isn't that neat? The prophet Zechariah that we've already mentioned, okay, he wrote this: when that day comes, there will no longer be merchants in the house of Adonai Tzavaot, which is the Lord of hosts. Then Jeremiah writes this: do you regard this house which bears my name as a cave for bandits? Den of robbers. Okay? I can see for myself what's going on, says Adonai. In other words, every step, every action, every word from here on out is right out of the Tanakh. And the number of verses out of the Old Testament that Yeshua and his disciples are acting out, really, are astounding. How many of them? It's beautiful. Okay? Now, one other little thing here, and then we'll be almost done. We looked at Mark and we looked at Matthew a little bit. Mark adds something. Okay, where in Matthew we read, it has been written, my house will be called a house of prayer. What does Mark add? To the nations. Okay, my house will be called a house of prayer for all the goyim. That means all the nations. Goyim is a Hebrew word that means you're not Israel. You got Israel and you got not Israel. So, we're going to go there more in the next message, right off of this statement right here. But it's amazing to me, because think about it, who is Mark writing to? He's writing to the Gentiles. He wants them to know that this house of Yehovah is not only for Jews. It's for all the nations. And furthermore, it has always been that way. Since way back in the days of Abraham, when God looked at Abraham and said, I'm going to make you a father of many goyim, many nations. All right? The goal and view and purpose of God has always been, from day one, everybody, I want everybody back in the garden. Okay? That's where we're going. And how many of you know that the tabernacle, which was the original model of what was made into the temple, it was built in order to resemble a garden? You know, all of those drawings and all of those etchings and all of that works of gold and all of that, it had these vines on it and branches on it. And that was one of Jehovah's ways of letting people know, I want to live with you, but I want to live with you in my garden. And what is unique about that garden? Other than it being the Garden of Eden. What is unique about that garden is those that are allowed in that garden are those that Shema. Hear and obey. Right? Isn't that why Adam and Eve got booted out? Because they didn't obey. They didn't hear and obey. But you notice at the end of the Genesis, in Genesis 3, at the very end of it, that God put cherubim, okay, heavenly beings as guards of what? The way back to the garden. Okay? It wasn't that they were guarding the tree, they were guarding the way to get back. In other words, in the mind of God, there's always been, and there will be until the end, a way to get back. Isn't that beautiful? There's a way to go home. There's a way to get back. Okay? So whatever it is that you have done or worried about or allowed or whatever in your life, and you're like, you know what, I'm done. There's no way God's going to want me. That's a lie. Okay? He wanted Adam and Eve. And he wants you and me, and there's a way back. How interesting that the next occurrence of two cherubim guarding something are the ones that are going to be on the ark. Because the ark is a way back. The ark is a model on display of the way back. You have the cherubim over the ark, and what's the lid of the ark? The mercy seat. Okay? Copperette, where the blood goes. And what's in the ark? The 10 words. Okay? And the bread and the staff of Aaron. But what's amazing is you have the, if you want to use the word commandments, I'll let you use them, even though really it's the words. You have the commandments of God. No other gods. You have no other gods. I am Yehovah who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Okay? You have no other gods before me, and on in those words. Those words are in the way back. But in order to get at them in the way back, you must go through the mercy seat where the blood is. Okay? See how this all goes together and together and together? And now, today, you read about in Matthew, now we have Yeshua entering in through the gate where they brought the sheep, where the blood was spilled, and now he will be the lamb, just like he is the mercy seat. Pretty amazing. All right. I will give you one more little taste of where we're going next. Okay, because you have this idea that my house will be a house of prayer for all the nations. Where is that? Okay, it's a quote. It's in Isaiah. Now, I want you to read all of this, not all the words I'm going to, you read the ones I'm going to have up there, but I want you to go back and read all of this chapter in Isaiah. It's amazing. It's beautiful. All right? This is an example of it. And the foreigners who joined themselves to Adonai to do what? Serve him and love the name of Adonai and to be his workers. All who keep Shabbat and do not profane it and hold fast to my covenant, I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all peoples, all nations, all goyim. Isn't that beautiful? We have a beautiful God. Okay, couple minutes, questions or otherwise. Yeah, there you go, John. Go ahead.
One of the prophets that looked ahead to this particular day of the entrance into Jerusalem was Daniel.
Daniel, yes.
And when he was talking about the prince and the 70th week, and, all of those details, it was studied by the Torah scholars, and they did the math. And they realized that that particular day was the day that the prince was supposed to come into Jerusalem. They knew that because that's what Daniel said. Josephus, who was there, said that that particular day, which was celebrated each year, was the greatest, most populated, most attended festival of its kind, even though it happened every year. There were 20 times, he said there were 20 times as many people there that year. Wow. that there normally was.
Wow.
So I can see why the people of Jerusalem were disturbed.
Yeah.
I mean, not only was it a lot of people, but they did that every year, but it was a lot of people.
Right.
And so they were naturally asking, well, who is this guy? Because they weren't all ignorant of this prophecy.
Right.
So if the prince is coming, and this is the day he's supposed to arrive, and Daniel said it, and people not just from Judea, but all over the world, Jews made that particular journey. That's how they got so many people. They were from all over the world. It was a really, really big deal.
Right.
It was very highlighted, very spotlit. It wasn't just the Galileans. They wanted to know who this guy was.
And isn't it amazing, even in the midst of all of that, isn't it amazing that you have the religious leaders that are like, nah, it's not going to be him. We're not going to allow that. Okay? I think maybe even some of them knew that it was, and they were like, yeah, but we're not going to allow that. So, pretty amazing. Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, over there.
I thought you were going to go to 2 Chronicles chapter 6 when you...
I know you did. I heard you.
I was like...
It's all right.
A house of all nations, that's what Solomon said in 2 Chronicles 6:32.
Yeah, go ahead, read it.
Moreover, concerning the stranger, which is not of your people Israel, but has come from a far country, for your great name's sake, and your mighty hand, and your stretched out arm, if they come and pray in this house, then hear thou from the heavens, even from your dwelling place, and do according to all that the stranger calls to you for, that all people of the earth may know your name, and fear you, as does your people Israel, and may know that this house which I have built is called by your name. And then when you were talking about the ark, I want to share this with you. I went to a Sukkot about 11 years ago, and they had this piece of wood that they covered with gold, and they passed it around so that you could see what it looks like to have shittim wood covered in gold. And I did not expect this. When this piece of wood came to me and I looked at it, it was like looking in a mirror. All I saw was myself. I didn't see the wood or the gold. I literally just saw me. I went, and then I had to look past that to actually look at the gold, and I realized I had a revelation that when you're standing before the bema seat, you are judging yourself, and that's what Jewish tradition teaches, is that when we come before the Lord, He's not judging us. We're judging ourselves, and I believe that's why Yeshua says, by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. In a multitude of words there is sin. So, there's so many scriptures that say, keep my lips.
It's in one of the letters, John's letters. He writes about that, about that judgment, that whole judgment idea. So that's another reason that we want to be right in our walk. Yes.
So I understand or don't understand different languages, but how do we get around when we pray that we call Yeshua Jesus? Because your name's Pat, and if I stand on the other side of the room and call Ted,
by the way, this is my day. Remember that, right? This is my day, and I'm not wearing green.
Oh, but how does that? I mean, I know He can look into our heart, but I mean, when we come into the knowledge of something, how can we just keep calling Him something He never was called?
Here's why. All right. What was that?
He called me Frank.
Parker. It's okay, Frank. Here's why. One of the maybe the hardest thing that we have to do as humans is change our minds about something. That's it. We hold on to it. When you learn, if you're like me and you grew up knowing Jesus, basically, and that's the way you learn it, and you learn it that way year after year after year after year, and then you learn, His Hebrew name really is this. Then what I did was I learned how to use it. I learned how to use His name.
But I get that part.
Can't hear you.
Oh.
Where's the mic? Oh, Jeremy took the mic away. Do you not want to hear Dante? Oh, sorry.
I mean, I get that part, but a name is a name is a name, and Jesus doesn't mean anything because it's not His name and it has no meaning. But I understand God knows who we're talking about, but how do we... And how does that even work? If I put skis on my car, it's not going to roll down the road. I mean, it's not His name, and it's not really even a name.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. You have an answer, or do you?
Yeah, part of the answer.
God isn't the word either. You know that.
I understand that, but that's
Elohim.
more of a title, but not a name.
It is. Yeah.
And in any language, you could use a different term for title.
So what are we? We are people that are learning. Some of us are learning and use that name. It's the only one that we use. Others of us don't even know what you mean. I'm just letting you know. It's one of the reasons I use it. I use it because I know in any group or audience, and I want them to know that the guy, the one that they know as Jesus, all right, they know Him, but they don't know Him. Okay, and that begins with the revelation of His name, but there's a lot more, right? So, good point.
So let me interject this, and that is that so many of us are unlearning things that we've been taught so long, like Pat said. It's easy to confuse tradition with truth, and they can be completely different.
That's exactly right. Yep. Okay, one more. Who else had their hand up? Oh, sorry. On the left. And you guys can, you don't need to leave right away. You can hang out and debate and whatever.
To me, the bottom line is that the J in the alphabet wasn't invented and didn't come into use until the 16th century.
Yep.
So how could it, I mean, it's Yeshua.
Now, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But if you didn't know that and you lived back in I don't know, 1700s or something like that, and you didn't know that, then you used the name that you knew. If I was a dad, okay, and my daughter or whatever, for whatever reason, wasn't able to pronounce my name, and she had another name for me, which happens a lot in families, Baba or whatever, I'd be all right with that. Now, I would want her to grow up and grow out of that, but I would be all right with that. So as long, these things that we're learning and unlearning, he's right. Learning is not that is easy. Unlearning is what's not easy, and that's what we've been doing. So, okay, well, let's stand up together and allow me to speak these words of blessing over you. And these are not my words; these are words in the Bible, and you'll hear them in English and in Hebrew. Okay. And the way I learned this originally was the Lord may the Lord bless you and keep you. But that's not what you're going to hear tonight, okay? So if you want to close your eyes, put your hand on your heart, you could do that. Yehovah will bless you and keep you. Yehovah will make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. Yehovah will look you in the eyes and give you his shalom. Yivarekha Yehovah v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Yehovah panav elecha v'kuneka. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Shabbat shalom. By the way, we need to remove the chairs tonight.